Hi everyone, today we're going to introduce Unit 1, Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions. When people talk about cross-cultural communications, Gert Hofstede is a name that is very often mentioned. Hofstede is a Dutch social psychologist who is renowned for developing a model to describe differences among national cultures. The model consists of various dimensions. In today's lesson, I will briefly introduce these cultural dimensions to you. Originally, there were only 4 dimensions, but after a period of research in Hong Kong, he added the 5th one. And again, in 2010, he added the 6th dimension. These dimensions are individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, power distance, masculinity versus femininity, long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. The first 3 are much more commonly known by people around the world. First, individualism versus collectivism. In an individualistic culture, people tend to emphasize the I more than the we. In other words, they often value more what an individual wants than what the group wants. On the other hand, in a collectivistic culture, people tend to value group harmony and often show undoubted loyalty and support to us, even when there is a conflict between a person and the group he or she belongs to. The second one is power distance. In a culture where power distance is clear among different classes, people who belong to the lower class would tend to accept the unfair way they are treated by people in the higher class. In other words, people with less power or in lower classes usually will not question authority or ask for more power for themselves. One well-known case of this is the caste system in India. The third one is uncertainty avoidance. In very simple English, this means the degree to which members of a culture can tolerate uncertainty and ambiguity. In a culture with high uncertainty avoidance, people tend to feel uncomfortable with things they are not familiar with or cannot control. They prefer a structured environment. In contrast, in a low uncertainty avoidance culture, people are more likely to accept new ideas and behaviors. As they prefer to live in a less structured environment, they may, for example, also be more interested in entrepreneurship or going into business for themselves. The 3 dimensions mentioned above are more well-known and popular in discussion on cross-cultural communication. The following are 3 dimensions that are equally important but comparatively less well-known. The 4th one is masculinity versus femininity. Please do not automatically assume that this refers to a comparison between men and women. It would be more accurate to see this as task orientation versus person orientation. In other words, if a culture values more a person's achievement, wealth, and success, rather than his or her ability to cooperate and be modest and caring, then in Hofstede's terms, this is a masculine culture. It is a culture that values more a person's material rewards and success. However, in a feminine culture, though material success is also important, the quality of life and the ability to care for others and show empathy will be more valued. The fifth dimension is long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. If a culture is a short-term one, it honors and keeps traditions, and it doesn't like to change too much, and focuses on short-term profits. On the other hand, a long-term oriented culture would value adaptation and pragmatic problem-solving abilities. In other words, a short-term oriented country may have little economic development, while a long-term oriented one usually continues to develop to a certain degree. The last one is indulgence versus restraint. This dimension is basically a measure of happiness. An indulgent culture usually allows its people to have more control over the pursuit of their basic and natural human desires for happiness. However, people in a restrained culture tend to believe that there are other factors in the society that control their happiness and emotions. Okay, these are the 6 dimensions of Hofstede. Please remember that this is not a clear-cut dichotomy to make distinctions between the East and the West, men and women, and so on. However, we can actually see a pattern after carefully researching cultures around the world. For example, there is a clear gap between Western and Eastern countries on individualism versus collectivism. Well, I will say no more here and leave it for you to find out more.